This is a tutorial for learning to make a simple part in Autodesk Fusion 360. So right now what I have is just a blank uh, file. I have not started anything, just started up the program, and it's time to start to create. So you should have already logged on. You can see, if you see your name or your identification up here, that you've already logged on. If you logged on, then all of your things that you create will be saved in your cloud space on the education version. As you can see, I'm using the education license. This is for learning purposes only. So once you've logged in to your account, you're ready to go, and it's time to start designing. So I've already selected new design, and it's going to open up another one, but just that's where you find it, up in the file section. You're going to select new design. So I already have my new design going, and before I get designing anything, I want to save it and create a space for it to be on my cloud space. So I'm going to click save, and it's going to bring up this window. I need to give it a name, so I'm going to call this example arm, since we're building what could be used for a trebuchet arm. And I want to tell it where to put it. So these are grouped into projects, and you can create folders within those projects. I've already created a project tutorial. If you want to create a new one, click on new, and then you'll give it a name. Or you can create new folders within projects to kind of group your parts. But I'm just going to go ahead and put it in tutorial and click save. So at this point we are ready to go. Anytime I click save, it's going to update the version of what it is that I'm designing, and it's time for us to get creating. So to start, we have to start with a sketch, and there's up here, the little button is where you start to create a sketch. So if you click on that, and now you have to decide, all right, what plane am I going to design it on? And the thing that's showing here corresponds to, right now, our view that we have. You can see the XY plane is over in this right hand side, so this is the XY plane, and that's where I want to start designing things, is in my XY plane. So I'm going to click XY plane, and then it shifts the view, so I'm just seeing that plane. So we're going to be creating a 2D, two-dimensional sketch that then we can turn into a three-dimensional object. Since I don't really need to see this sketch palette right now, I'm just going to minimize that. And what I want to start with is just a simple rectangle. So up here are several different tools that you can create shapes. If you want to see more different shapes that you don't see up here, you can click on this drop-down menu to show all kinds of different shapes that you can create. But we're going to start with just a simple two-point rectangle, and I'm going to, 2-point means that when you click, it lays down, sets the location for the first point, and then you click a second time to place the second corner. So I want to stick the first corner at the origin, and you can see my little cursor here shows me, and it's clicking to the grid, shows me where I'm going to stick that first point. And once I get around the origin, you can see it's snapped to that the origin right there, and it shows that I'm at the origin with this little blue box around the circle that indicates the origin. So I click first, and now I'm going to drag without clicking, just drag up and away, and now I have the opportunity to specify the dimensions of this rectangle. So before I click a second time, I'm going to go ahead and type in the dimensions, and it wants the Y dimension first. So I'm going to say 1.5 inches and then hit tab. It'll go to the second one, the second dimension, the X dimension, and I want this to be a 6-inch piece. So when I'm done specifying the dimensions there, I go ahead and hit enter, and now you can see the sketch of the part that I'm starting to create. So in case this ever gets bigger than your screen, you can use these little buttons down here to help you change the view so you can see all of your parts. So I'm going to click this and it zooms in so that everything I've drawn so far fits on the screen of that I'm looking at right now. So that helps if you sort of lose where you're at in your part design. Now I can see I've got this orange box with the dimensions. I have my Y dimension and my X dimension. And if I want to change that, which I do, I'm going to change this X dimension. I'd like to change that to 16 inches. All I have to do is double click and it'll open that dimension. And I can type in the dimension, the new dimension that I want. Now this has gotten way much bigger than what's on my screen, so I'm going to click this little fit zoom again, and now I can see the entire sketch. Alright, so now I've finished with that sketch, and I actually would like to draw another rectangle inside this big rectangle. So I'm going to say create, I'm going to add a 2-point rectangle, and I'm going to draw it somewhere over here inside my bigger rectangle. And right now I'm not going to worry too much about the dimensions. We'll fix that in a second. Okay, so I've placed my rectangle. Now I need to tell it exactly where it needs to be in space and how big it needs to be. So I'm going to use the dimension tool. So this tells the sketch dimension, helps me place my drawing exactly and give it exact measurements, so that when we go to give it 3 dimensions and further design, then it will know where all the drawings are. So I'm going to first tell it that I want it to be 5 inches long, and so I click the bottom of this new little rectangle I've drawn, I pull that dimension away, and I click again to place the location of the dimension. Now it gives me an opportunity to change that dimension, and I'm going to give it a 5-inch length. See now, and it expands it to 5 inches. So now I've told it how big it is, but I need to tell it where exactly to place this little inside rectangle. So to do that, I want there to be 1/2 inch between the bottom of the smaller rectangle and the bottom of the larger rectangle. So now I'm going to click once on the bottom of the smaller rectangle and once on the bottom of the larger rectangle and pull that dimension away. And I'd like that to be 1/2 inch. It already is, but it's going to give me, as soon as I click, an opportunity to type that in. I like 1/2 inch, so I'm going to do that. And now this line is fully dimensioned because it has a length and it has a position. So it's turned black. I can do the same thing with this line. I want it to be the top of my small rectangle to be 1/2 inch away from the top of my large rectangle, and it is. So I like that. I'm going to keep that 1/2 inch, and now that is fully dimensioned as well. It's turned black. The last thing I have to dimension is how I want to place the rectangle along the x-axis. So now I'm going to click this dimension, or this edge of the small one and the edge of the larger one, and I would like that to be 1/2 inch as well. So 0.5, and now it'll move it into space. So now it's fully dimensioned. The whole thing is turned black. It is knows exactly where it is in space and how big that other rectangle is. Before I finish this sketch, I'm going to draw a circle so that I can pan over. I'd like this circle to be somewhere in the middle, and actually I'm going to fit to the window so that I can see that really well. So I'm going to draw a circle, and this is a center and diameter circle. So it's going to find the center, and that's where, when I click the first time, it will place the center of the circle, and then I'll drag it away, my cursor or my mouse away, and then click the second time to place the diameter. But I want this circle to sit in the center of this rectangle, and it's already giving me a bit of a, can you see that little blue dashed line? So that I know I'm centered on the x-axis, but I want the y-axis center as well. So I'm going to go over here and kind of let it see where I am for the y-axis, and now it's going to show me the center on the y-axis and the x-axis, which is the center of the drawing. So now that I'm over that center, I will click to define my circle, pull up and away, and you can see it's giving me the diameter dimension. I want this to be a small circle, so I'm going to make it just so you can see that as I pull up and away, it shows me the diameter. I would like this to be sort of small. I really only want this to be 0.125 inches, so that's going to be kind of tiny to specify my circle. So now it shows the diameter of the circle. If I want to, I can move this dimension over so I can see that a little bit better. And if I zoom in a bit, you can do this by clicking and dragging, or if you have a mouse with a roller in the middle, that will also zoom in and out. So now I can see that this circle is blue. I have to tell it where I want the center to be placed. So I know the diameter, but it doesn't have the placement yet. So I'm going to again dimension it, hover over the circle of the circle, the center of the circle, select that, and then select the bottom edge of my rectangle. I would like it to be 0.75 inches, which it is, so that is correct. Now I need to also dimension the distance along the x-axis, so I have to zoom out a little bit. Zoom out, and I'm going to click my dimension tool again, find the center of my circle, click once, go over and find the edge, click there once, and I want that to be 8 inches, which it is. Now it's turned black, my circle is fully dimensioned, and I am ready to go. So now I'm finished with this sketch. I can say Finish Sketch, and it will take me out to view what my part looks like so far. We'll get that to fit in the window. And if I have this little navigation block over here to help me kind of turn my part in space so I can see it in 3 dimensions. You can see that as I pivot this, it is just a flat part. So I would like to give it some dimension. To do that, I'm going to extrude this part. So I click on Extrude, and now I have to say what to extrude. I can extrude this little piece inside here, I can extrude the little circle, or I can extrude the whole part, with the exception of the holes that I've drawn. So this will extrude everything but the small rectangle and the small circle. So I'm going to click on that to extrude. And now it gives me an arrow, so I can either choose to push and pull this arrow to extrude, to say how much I want to extrude, and or I can use the extrude menu over here to choose how I'm going to extrude. We're going to do a one-sided extrude and measured distance, and I want to extrude 0.75 away from me. So if you see here, there's a negative value. That means that that's into the plane or away from me. A positive value, if I drag this here, would be toward me extruding. But I want to keep that surface so that I can draw on it further. So I'm going to type negative 0.7, and you may have to arrow over 5, and that gives me 0.75 inches into the plane of my drawing, or away from me. So now I've given my part some thickness, and you can see as I rotate it, there's some thickness, and it did not extrude either that rectangle that I had drawn or the little circle that I had drawn. So those are now holes in my part, which is what I wanted. Okay, now I'm going to draw another shape on my part, and I am going to orbit this a little bit, and I want to zoom in so I can see a little bit better. I'm going to zoom right in here. So to draw another sketch, I'm going to click Create Sketch, and now I need to determine what plane I'm going to create the sketch on. I could create it on the top or the bottom or the back side, but I'm going to create it on the front side of this part that I have already drawn. So now it moves to the two-dimensional view, and I want to create a hexagon. So I now need to use this drop-down menu and polygon, and I want to do a circumscribed polygon. So polygon just means many-sided shape. Circumscribed means that it is it's going to be drawn around a circle whose diameter I will decide. So the circumscribed polygon, I'm going to click on that, and it's similar to the circle. I place the center of the polygon, and I drag up and away, and its already default is a 6-sided polygon. I like that, so I'm going to keep that default because I want a hexagon. And as I draw up and away, it gives me an opportunity to create the dimension. I want this to be a 1/2 inch for the diameter of the circle, which will give me an inch measured from flat edge to flat edge of my hexagon. So I'll type in 0.5 and click enter. So now I have a hexagon placed. I do need to dimension this hexagon, and actually I want to place it a little bit different. So I'm going to undo that one, start again. I'd like it to be the flat edge on the top. So 0.5 and hit enter, and now I have it rotated the direction that I want it to be rotated in. I do now need to dimension it in space so that I know exactly where it is and how it's rotated. So it knows it's fine with its location and its dimension. If you look over here, it has a little concentric dimensioned constraint. But I would like to make sure that this edge is parallel to this edge, and that is what I'm looking to define. So over here in this constraints, I'm going to click the parallel constraint. So what I would like to have parallel is this edge. I'll click that once, and this edge. So I can click that as my second click, and now it's black. That parallel constraint is shown right there, and I'm done with dimensioning and fully defining that hexagon. So now I can click Finish Sketch. Alright, what I would like to do is cut this away from my part so that I can fit another fitting inside that. We're going to actually use this to put a bearing inside so our arm can rotate. So to do that, I'm going to actually extrude, and now I'm going to use, I want to extrude this surface. I don't want to add material, I actually want to take away material. So instead of creating a new body, I'm going to create a cut. So I want to cut not this direction but away, so I'm cutting into the part. And I could actually at this point enter in any dimension that is greater than the thickness of my part, and it would cut it. But I know the thickness of my part, and it needs to go in the negative direction, so I'll say negative 0.75. That was my issue. Try that again. Alright, negative 0.75. And it is cutting, you can see it's cutting into the part. So that's what I want. Click OK, or you can hit enter, and now you can see there's a hole in the part where I had that drawing. And you can see as I rotate that around what that hole looks like. So to get back to my front view and the back view, oh my goodness, it's very squirrely. There we go, here's my front view. And so that I can see the whole part, I'll just click zoom. Now you can see I have the holes placed where I'd like to have them placed. And I am, if this is finished, I'm ready to, I could 3D print this at this point. Before I do that, I'm going to save my part. It's going to ask for a description of this version. I'll just leave it user saved. If you want to describe it further, you can. And I'll hit save. And it saves my arm up to the cloud, and it updates the version to now version 2. So, in order to print this, it has to have a special file that 3D printers can read, and they would like an STL file. So we're going to create that right now. I want an STL file of this body, so I'm going to click on the arrow of to expand bodies, maybe. Okay, so sometimes in your drawings, at least it happens for me every now and then, Autodesk, the Fusion 360 program just won't see my clicks, and it won't respond to clicking, and that's what seemed to happen there. So I've restarted the program, and here we are with the arm example, and what I want to do is create an STL file. So to do that, I'm going to click on this arrow by bodies, and I'm going to right click on body 1, which is my arm. I can also I can move that to a different group. I can change the material, I can change textures, I can do all kinds of things, and I can save as STL. That's what we want to do. It's that STL file that 3D printers recognize and use when they're printing. So click on Save as STL. Over here it brings up this little box for doing some selections. I'm going to leave it as is. If I want, I can change this refinement, and basically it is as I want it right there. So go ahead and click OK, and it's going to ask me where to put it. So I will select a location on your computer. It may be different, but I'm going to name this example arm and click save. And that file that you've now created is something that you can export and use on a 3D printer. That's something that you should submit to whoever's printing for you, or you can take it directly if you have your own printer. One thing other to see is this data panel. This helps you navigate around inside Fusion 360. So if you click on the data panel, I'm going to arrow over, that's my parts that we just drew. Here is where you have all of your list of your projects that you've created. So here was our tutorial project that we've done. If I double click on that, it shows the arms that I've created inside that tutorial. I can add folders, and I can store things in folders within that project. If you share a project with somebody, it's going to share everything that's inside that project. That might be something that you would want to be able to do, so that's where you do that. And I want to get rid of that data panel, so I'll just close it out, and I can make any other modifications to my part. That's it for this tutorial.